Okay guys, well, let's get into it. So, final round, I'm playing the legend, Grandmaster Leonid Yudasin. I was very much, as I mentioned, looking forward to this game. Of course, at this point, my score actually needs to be updated. At this point, I'm on 3.5 out of 9. So still -1. But, well, I felt if I could win this game, I would be back to even, and then the tournament would actually be quite successful. And I was feeling optimistic about my chances here. I think Yudasin had not been having the best event so far. You know, with white, I felt like, okay, maybe I can try to put pressure and hope to outplay him somewhere. So we start with d4, knight of 6, c4, e6, knight of 3, and b6. He goes for the Queen's Indian, which I think he's played for like since longer than I've been alive, honestly. So I wasn't sure how successful I'm going to be here, but okay, this was, you know, this is still kind of my main opening. So I go for g3, bishop b7, bishop g2, bishop e7, castles, and now he plays d5. This is kind of an older line. Normally, black just castles themselves here, and then white has many options. Knight c3 is very natural. White can also play this well-known pawn sacrifice with d5, where the idea is that after black takes this one, white goes knight h4, and just creates a lot of pressure, tries to recapture the pawn and force black to do awkward things to hold on to it. But here he just goes d5 right away, which is a bit inflexible, but he's kind of stopping me from playing d5. I took, e takes d5, knight c3, castles, and knight e5. There are different ways of developing here. I mean, there's lots and lots of useful moves. Bishop f4, b3 is also fine. Different ideas. I start with knight e5. This is a very thematic move, just activating the knight, opening up the bishop. And there's also a bit of a trick involved with this move. If black goes knight d7, which looks very natural, then white actually has this move queen a4. And this one is pretty annoying for black, because I'm actually threatening either knight c6 or just like knight takes d7, followed by winning the d5 pawn. So queen takes, and then knight takes d5, and it's already bad for black. And if black takes on e5, well then d takes e5, and then the d5 pawn ends up being really weak here as well. So this actually poses huge problems. Instead, okay, black plays knight a6, which is more solid. And now again, I think white has different moves here, like bishop f4, followed by rook c1, I think is very common. I decided to play b3. I'm kind of fond of having the bishop on b2 in these kinds of positions, so I decided to just put it there immediately. Knight c7 is played, e3, knight e6, and now rook to c1. So all these moves I think have been very natural, and at this point black could take on d4, force me to take back with the pawn, and kind of equalize the structure. I still think white would be better here after something like maybe rook c8, rook e1. You know, it just feels like my pieces are more active. I got my knight to e5, and I should have a little bit of pressure here, but maybe not too much. Instead, black goes rook e8, like he doesn't really want to clarify the situation just yet. But this gives me a chance to take on c5, which I decide to do at this moment. And after b takes c5, my idea is, of course, to play against the hanging pawns. I decide to go queen e2 here, followed by rook fd1, and just trying to go after the d5 pawn. Question, do I not mind the isolated queen's pawn? Well, no, because we both have one. So here, because we both have one, like both pawns are, let's say, equally weak, and so yeah, neither side really minds this too much. But given that it's a symmetrical structure, the fact that white has slightly more active pieces, I think, is relevant. Yeah. So rook e8 takes, and I was actually unfamiliar with, like, you know, this position. There was a game that actually reached this exact position, a pretty high level game from the Isle of Man Grand Swiss in 2019. And in that game, GM Fedoseev, you guys probably know, is like 2,700 player. He played this move rook to c2, which I actually considered during the game but then rejected because I didn't feel like it was the right moment. It's actually a pretty thematic move in these types of positions, but the idea is just to transfer the rook over to d2 and then put a lot of pressure on this d5 pawn. And this is actually a pretty strong idea, but yeah, I didn't really, I don't know, fully believe in it. But yeah, it is a good move, and if I had the position again, hopefully I would play this one because it is quite nice. So queen e2, queen d6, and this queen d6 move is actually quite strong because I kind of thought I would have knight b5 here, but knight b5 is actually not that great. I mean, I hit the queen, I defend the knight, but after queen to b6, black now has bishop a6 coming next, and yeah, I actually didn't really want to get myself into this mess. Like I can play a4, but a4 is weakening, and then black maybe even has a6, and the b3 pawn could hang. So this is not something I wanted to get into, but then after queen d6, I couldn't figure out what to do with my knight. Like, I don't really want to go back knight f3 or knight d3, but yeah, what else to do? Knight a4 also just didn't really appeal to me here. Oh yeah, because I also have to watch out for bishop a6. So yeah, very annoying move, and it shows what's wrong with queen e2. I end up playing knight d3 because, okay, what else to do? Bishop a6 had to be blocked. Now black goes queen a6, rook fd1, and d4. And a very strong move because he is getting his main pawn break in and trading off the fianchettoed bishop. And if I take on b7, queen takes b7, knight a4 for example, knight g5, I think just immediately get absolutely wrecked here. So right away after d4, I actually started feeling like this is possibly a critical situation. Thankfully, I have knight a4 here, and I realized in time that if bishop takes g2, king takes g2, knight g5, I am okay here. Queen b7 check, also possible, but then here I can at least go f3, and black doesn't have anything immediate, and okay, there's also the c5 pawn hanging, so it's not like black can just do whatever they want here. But on knight g5, this one felt very tricky, but I realized I can go h4, queen b7 check f3, and I'm kind of holding here. Yeah, actually, I should also mention queen b7 check, queen f3. White can also play. I think this is absolutely fine for white, and black doesn't really want to go into an endgame here with the c5 pawn being a big weakness. So yeah, I was expecting takes, knight g5, and then I was going to go h4, queen b7 check f3, and pretty much just hope for the best. It's definitely felt like just a very messy position where white could be in big trouble, but I didn't really see how exactly black is going to like bust open the king's side here. Like maybe there's some knight g4 tries, but not sure if it's so obviously great for black. In any case, he ends up going d takes e3, which definitely was a welcome surprise. Because now I take back, and c5 pawn is very weak. Bishop takes g2, king takes g2, and now black doesn't even have knight g5, and if queen b7 check, again we have queen f3. And here I actually started to feel much better about my chances. So knight e5, because I just felt like, well, if I can control the c4 square, I just kind of have free play against this pawn. Bishop f8, h4, just kind of a neutral improving move, also stopping knight g5, so I never have to worry about this one in the future. And here black goes knight d4. And yeah, very interesting moment because I can just take a pawn if I want to, but I believe my opponent's idea was to go rook c1, queen e2. So hitting this one, hitting my knights, and if black just wins their pawn back, I felt like I have nothing. I did notice I have this move, knight d7, where if black takes on a2, then I'm taking on f6, and after knight takes d7, queen takes d7, black is not in time to get their pawn back. But I thought even some position, like let's say rook e6, I take on a7, black takes on a2. I felt very pessimistic about my chances to win this one. Despite having the extra pawn, I just felt like my extra pawn is pretty weak. My knight on a4 is very, like, you know, it's not exactly loose, but it's not really achieving much on the queen side, right? In this very open position, literally nothing in the knight's range. Maybe you can one day get a tempo on the rook, but even on c5, it's kind of loose. So I don't know. I just felt like my chances here are slim. I think the engine gives rook c3 as the only move for white to keep an advantage. Maybe not the hardest move to figure out, but still, like, yeah, really, I don't know, wasn't sure about this one. So I decided to go queen d3. I just felt like this maybe keeps more chances on the board. I don't think it's right, but at least that was my reasoning. Now black takes. He could have given queen b7 check as well, but then queen f3, I would just try to keep chasing. But he decides to go for the endgame right away, plays g6. King f3. Here, I honestly thought maybe I'm getting something, because at least I have the nice blockade. This d pawn is possibly weak. You know, I have 2 versus 1 on the queen side. But objectively, I actually don't really think I have much here, because black plays knight d5, and now he actually has a very simple plan like bishop g7, knight c3, and being very active with this one. So yeah, I go rook takes c8, rook takes c8. You know, I'm still playing for chances here. Knight e5, hitting the d pawn and the knight. Black goes knight c3. And here I take on d4. And he takes on a2. Actually, kind of surprising. I was really expecting bishop g7 here, after which I thought black is totally fine, because to me it looked like I have to go rook to c4, and then black can take on c4, knight takes c4, knight takes a2, and I couldn't really see why white would have anything in this position. You know, I'm not really close to the a pawn. Black's bishop is probably the best minor piece on the board. So yeah, my king is maybe a little bit closer, but to me this looked very drawish. The engine actually points out in this position after bishop g7, I have this move, which I did not consider. It's kind of a funny trick. After bishop takes e5, it looks like white's just losing a piece, but I have knight d5. And I'm just in time to threaten knight e7 check. So it's very computery. You can understand why I didn't even consider the move knight takes e3. It just looks like takes bishop e5. I'm losing it. Like, I don't know. My brain just didn't refuse to look at it any further. So the engine says, yeah, it's like a little bit better here for white. I think black has nothing better than takes and going for this position. But even this position where white's a pawn up, it's, I think, really a microscopic advantage for white. Like, I actually think it'd be very hard to convert this one, given that the bishop is just really strong on both sides of the board. If rook c2 here, I mean, there might be, you know, rook a4, rook e4. I'm not really sure, but maybe rook a4 might be a good way to proceed here. But even this, definitely not like, I don't think promises huge chances for white. But okay, extra pawn would be nice. But I don't know. I mean, on bishop g7, I think I was just gonna play rook c4 right away, and then we would, because I mean, I really didn't have this on my radar at all. And then we get something like this, and I don't know. I think it's very, very drawish. But in the game, black goes knight takes a2 immediately, which surprised me, because now that allows me to play rook to d7, and here at least I thought I'm getting some activity. Knight c1 was played, knight takes f7, knight takes b3, and I was really happy with this transformation, because I mean, we still have 3 pawns each, equal material, but the fact that I won a pawn on the king side and left black with some weaknesses means, you know, I have a lot of upside here. I thought, you know, maybe I can win the a pawn one day and then just have an extra pawn and possibly go after the king side. And like with 2 knights, if I could activate this knight, you know, and bring this knight closer to the king side, 2 knights and the rook, right, could be cause some very serious annoyances for black's king. That said, objectively, I mean, the position is still very drawish, but okay, I was just trying to keep at least some chances alive on the board. Now black goes bishop g7, allowing me to take the pawn, but if I were to play this one, then I think bishop g7 or bishop d4 was kind of annoying, and then rook c4 is the idea, and my knight on a4 is pretty much caught. So this would be quite unpleasant. Also, there's threats of like rook f8 and taking on f2 here. So takes, knight g5, bishop g7. I go knight e6, hitting the bishop, bishop h8, and now king g2. So just getting out of any possible checks like rook f8 or rook c3. I mean, both of these are currently covered, but if my knight moves, I don't want to allow this one. So just improving my king. Now black played rook e8, knight g5, h6, knight h3. And so I'm just rerouting my knight just to try to get back into the game. And okay, now a very surprising move, bishop e5, because now black allows me to just finally take on a7. Earlier, there were some tactical reasons why I didn't really want to, but I thought especially at this point, black is just going to go a5, and I really didn't see why not make this move. Though, yeah, I should note at this point we're both kind of, again, approaching time trouble, so that definitely played a factor in this game. But yeah, I think a5 here I was thinking, and I was still optimistic, I'm going to try to play for like knight f4 and stuff, and I think this is probably what my opponent was likely worried about. But yeah, I don't think it quite wins the game for white just yet, let's say, because black also has counterplay, like with rook e4 and using the a pawn. So it's really not so simple for white. But in any case, he goes bishop e5, so stopping knight f4, but allowing me to just pick up the a pawn. And okay, now I felt like a clean pawn up, 3 versus 2. I have a lot of pieces on the board. If it was a rook endgame, then it's just a very trivial draw. But with knights on the board, then I think there's definitely some decent chances here. So I go rook e6 is played. I go rook b7, rook a6, and I didn't really want to trade the knights off here, but I didn't feel like I had such a great choice. Maybe actually knight b6 would have been a better try, but I think I was worried about knight c5. Yeah, and I didn't see a great solution here. And maybe, I'm not sure if I have a way out. Maybe rook e7, but yeah, I think I didn't really want to get into all this in time trouble. But yeah, it would have been nice to keep both knights on the board so I could have more pieces to kind of put pressure against the king. But okay, I decide to simplify. Takes, rook b5, bishop d6. And now a big decision for me right here on the next couple moves was whether or not to play h5. My instinct was not to trade off the pawns so early, but I think objectively this probably does give white better chances in the long run. I could try to eventually bring the knight to f5, start pushing f4, and I think objectively it's a draw, but definitely at least some chances for white to convert. Instead, I just decided to just try to keep more pawns on the board. So rook d5, rook a6, knight g1, the knight starts to come back, knight f3, king f6, knight d2, and okay, this was the last chance for me maybe to play h5, and I think white is doing fairly well, but okay, I play knight d2, king e6, rook b5, and finally he goes h5. And now knight e4 and bishop e7. And around here, I definitely got the sense that objectively black should be totally fine, because it just feels like his bishop is very nicely controlling the knight, and it's going to be really hard to make progress. But okay, I mean, we're essentially doing an episode of Endgame Sensei at this point, so I decided to, keep playing and keep pushing. So knight d2, rook a4, check, rook c6, rook a5, knight e4, and I'm just kind of slowly maneuvering around. Here I decide to push f4, king h3, rook a2, rook c7, so just looking for like some knight g5 stuff possibly. King f8 is played, rook b7. I definitely didn't want to play knight g5 just yet because I felt like most rook endgames that look like this would probably be drawn. So I just wanted to keep the pieces on the board. So rook b7, rook c2, rook b5. And yeah, now my plan is actually just to push f5. And I know I mentioned I didn't want to trade pawns earlier, but now I felt like I kind of have to. This is my only plan in the position, is to leave black with kind of an extended h-pawn that maybe I can try to target. And now in a dream scenario, I bring my knight to f4, I put my rook on the 5th rank, and I can win the pawn. And so that's what I kind of start playing for. So knight f2, rook c5, of course I avoid the rook trade, knight d3, rook a5, knight f4, bishop f6, rook b7 check, king g8. I was happy to get the king on the back rank. And now rook to d7, kind of an important move because I'm preparing either knight d5 or possibly rook to d5. So now black goes rook to b5, and of course, key variation I had to try to understand was what happens in this position, because this move would force the rook trade. And then since I'm threatening to come back with knight f4, black doesn't have time to both move the bishop and save the h-pawn, right? So if bishop e5, knight f4, white is winning this one and winning the game. So black would have to play king g7. So then on knight f4, they have time to play king h6. Of course, this allows me to go into the king and pawn endgame, but I was thinking that this is a draw during the game, and I'm pretty sure it is, because, okay, of course, g4 is absolutely nothing, but if I try to come back this way, let's say, I think actually even king f5, but let's say king e5 just to be a little bit more precise, king f3, king f5, and yeah, I don't think white is winning this one. I think even king f5 here, actually, I don't see how white wins this position either, even if we get the opposition. So that one's not working, so I play king g2, and my idea is to bring the king in. So with my king on f3, then the exact same king and pawn endgame would be winning. Black recaptures, knight f6, king f6. I play king f4 in that position, and then that's now winning. Then my king is able to get in. So king g2, rook b2 check, king f3, rook b3 check, king f2, and here black plays rook to b2 check, king e3, and now I think he realized that he's having some issues here, because if black continues giving checks, then I'm going to go rook d3. If we trade rooks, then it's immediately lost, and if the rook goes back to the 5th rank, then I have rook to d5. And we get that same position, except now the king is closer, and white is winning. So on king e3, he ends up going rook h2, which, okay, very logical move. He just wants to take on h4 and get rid of all the pawns. And I end up burning I think the rest of my time here just trying to figure something out. I considered the right move, which was rook d2. So now if black trades rooks, of course, the h-pawn is lost again. If black goes rook to h1, then I'm in time to play knight to g2. And I defend black from sacrificing. So I saw this position, but I didn't understand why exactly I want this. Like, how is this progress? But the point is that I'm defending h4 long enough to kind of stabilize the position, and then at the right moment, I'm going to bring the rook back to d5 and then just take this pawn. So, for example, if black just, immediately, let's say he plays rook a1, well then rook d5, and black is not holding this one. And if black goes king g7, trying to defend the pawn, then I get knight f4 back, and now I'm taking on h5 with check. So bishop takes h4, rook takes h5, and black is not in time here, and white wins. So a very, very subtle kind of bit of technique here, of course pointed out by the engine. But yeah, the idea is to just kind of defend h4 long enough for black to lose steam, and then bring the rook back to d5 at the right moment. Because of course here, the reason rook d2 is needed is because knight g2 is not available. But yeah, I didn't, I guess, see the follow-up. Like, to me, this looked passive, but yeah, it's actually a very, very nice idea. And then to wait for the king to come back to h6, when then the knight can come back to f4 and I take on h5 with check. So very, very subtle nuance, but I think a really interesting one. In any case, I end up playing knight g6, which is kind of the only other move in the position to defend this one from this angle. Rook a2. And here I actually make big mistake, king f3, which to me, okay, this move just felt logical to defend the pawn. But I actually didn't realize I can just switch back immediately, rook d5. And I think intuitively I didn't want to allow the king out, but actually king g7, knight comes back to f4, and that's it. Now I'm threatening to take on h5 with the knight with check. And so black just loses the pawn and would lose the game. So actually a very simple win I missed here just with immediate rook to d5. I just didn't really realize that I'm getting exactly what I wanted. So king f3 instead, giving black a chance to play rook a5 back. And now black is again holding. I played king e4, bishop c3, and now knight e7 check. I could go knight f4 again here, but then I think I was worried about stuff like bishop e1 and possibly rook a3, and so I'm not really in time. So knight e7 check, king f8, knight f5. Decide to put the knight on this square. King g8, king f4, now running to g5. And if my king can get in, then it looks very, very dangerous for black. Bishop f6. And here I play knight e3. And I actually started to think that, again, I'm making progress at this point, because now I want to go rook to d5. And once again, I'm winning the endgame now, since my king is super close, as is my knight. Knight d5 might also be an idea here. Basically it looked like he was intending to play rook a4 check, and then at the last second he actually just kind of hesitates, and this is something I've done before, but he was like about to play rook a4, then hesitates and ends up flagging on this move before he's able to. I think he even he gets it on the board, but his hand doesn't even reach the clock in time. So black ends up flagging in this position, and that's it, game over. The tragic thing is that he is actually about to save the game, because his idea with rook a4 check after king f5 was to take on h4, which I actually just missed in the game. I didn't realize he just wins the pawns. And that's it. Actually, white has nothing. I mean, I have to take the bishop, rook takes h4. I can try king g6, but king f8, and despite the rook and knight, of course it's not a win. I even have like knight f5, and it looks dangerous, but black is in time. Just rook g4 check, and king e8, and white isn't actually winning here. And that's the thing about the rook and knight mate, and why it's like such an easy defense generally, is that even if you get a position that looks like you're like almost winning, it's usually just drawn. I don't know, maybe white could try like rook d1 here, hoping for knight g7 check and rook d8 mates. But if I'm not mistaken, black probably can just defend by pinning the knights, and there's no way for white to make progress. And that usually is the key defense. You just pin the knight from behind and can't really do anything, and if the king steps off of the knight, then you usually have a check. So this would have been, I think, a pretty simple draw for him, and he even showed me after the game, this was his plan. But yeah, we got a little bit lucky here, of course, with the flag. But what can you do? I tried to put pressure, and I felt like I was making progress, and sometimes you win on the board, sometimes you win on the clock. Sometimes you win on the board because, the clock is running out and someone has to make a quick move. So you're kind of winning on the clock in that sense as well. So yeah, after this game, we finished with 4.5 out of 9 for an even score, which, considering that I was, 2.5 out of 7 going into the last 2 rounds, definitely a nice achievement by the end. And yeah, overall, as I kind of said at the beginning of all these recaps, I mean, not a great tournament for me. Like a lot of mistakes, a lot of difficult games. You know, some nice moments and some wins, but overall, I felt like yeah, I really struggled in a lot of the games, especially in like sharp tactical situations and the time scrambles. I definitely wasn't feeling super sharp. But that said, I mean the result was still quite decent, scoring even in a tournament where I was the eighth seed I think or ninth seed by rating, and most of the players being higher rated, not by much though, but a little bit. And yeah, exactly, Kush. On to me, it's kind of nice because it means there's just like so much upside. There's a lot of room for growth. The fact that I feel like I played kind of sloppy in this event, but the result ended up being not that bad means that yeah, there's lots of room to improve. And if I can fix some of the weaknesses, then maybe maybe we can raise our level a bit.